In some regards, I think the climate scientists and the IPCC are almost too honest. There's in everything that we do when we're talking about the future, there's always uncertainty. But what the IPCC has done is provided a framework where that uncertainty can be first analysed, communicated, to people who are non-climate scientists, so that it can be used in decision making by policymakers and by governments and so on. I think it's quite rare that if you look at other fields of where you project into the future, that they have that level of rigor that the IPCC has instilled into the climate change discussion, and talking about economic projections or those sorts of areas. So I think that what we have is a good framework to be able to understand what kind of uncertainty there is in the climate change projections, and enough so that we can use that within our planning. It's not that we can ever eliminate this uncertainty. We just have to learn how to manage it and to make decisions based on that uncertainty.
Yes, I think there are three things that we're advocating. First is that we talk to local planners in terms of trends, not precise figures. We can use precise figures to illustrate and to bring it home, but basically we're concerned about trends. Is it going up? How sharply is it going up? The second thing is we talk in terms of ranges. So what's the range of temperature that might be possible given all the various studies and analysis? And the third thing is to take a precautionary approach in your development. If you're developing along the coast or you're developing agriculture, you put in place crops and systems that assume there will be that variability. It will evolve. So allow yourself responses that within the variable range and the trends that are being shown that will keep you resilient. It may be increasing the diversity of your cropping systems, the number of crops you use. It may be a range of other management techniques to optimize your water use or to conserve your water use, or at least give you options if it's a drier period. So I think that's the key. Not to worry too much about the precision of the future, because we know it's not precise, but more to be cautious in your decisions against projections on trends and ranges.
Thanks. There was another question. On the question of yes, the relationship with other aid projects.
Thank you for your question. As I mentioned at the beginning, USAID has regional programs, but we also have bilateral programs with the different countries. And so the Philippines, they have developed their own bilateral program with the government to respond to the needs in the Philippines, and that's negotiated each year. They come up with their program activities. For us to coordinate with them, and even though Philippines is not one of the 4 countries that we're dealing with in the study, we have an annual workshop for a week. We bring all the climate change specialists in the bilateral missions together in Bangkok, and we talk about our programs and where the successes are, so that everyone understands what the others are doing, and we share activities and best practices at that meeting. Thank you.
But what are the next steps for this study in terms of communicating information with communities and local planners, and what is your time frame?
Well, the study should be finalized by May. And the next steps really are, we want to build on programs that are already in the field and bring this science to those programs. So we're not going to go out and develop new programs. We're going to seek out partners who are working in some, 5 to 6 of these hotspot areas. So the hotspots really help to prioritize where we'll work. And then we'll take the science and help, and our partners will help us to translate that to communities. And again, it's important that they've already been on the ground, because they'll have a relationship with the communities, they'll have processes that they work through in terms of how they communicate to the communities. And that translation is really important. Not only taking the science down, but also getting the communities to project what their hopes and what they see in terms of climate in the future, to get a shared understanding between science and between the communities see. And once they do that, they'll start developing adaptation strategies. What will be important then is to assess not only the viability of those strategies, but also the cost. So we have to do some cost-benefit analysis to determine which of those strategies for the long term are viable and make sense. And then those projects will run for about 2.5 years. And at the end of this, we hope to take those lessons up and best practices up and work with some regional institutions. We talk to ADB, we talk to the MRC to get the lessons out and spread more widely throughout the region.
How are the adaptation projects to be funded?
How will they be funded? So, so USAID, I'm a contractor of the USAID. So USAID has provided us with a contract, and within that contract we have specific funding for these adaptation initiatives. But again, what's important is that there's a process that communities will go through, and that process has to extend out past the life of this project if we are going to actually achieve adaptation, because adaptation is on a time scale that's a lot longer than the 3.5 years we have left to go on this project.
Any other questions?
Perhaps it's worth adding, Brad, I don't know if you want to speak to this, but this project is also meant to facilitate the drawing down of global climate funds through other arms of other projects of AIDS program. And that's, I think, probably a very significant characteristic. It's connected with other sources of funding to follow up.
Maybe I could speak to that a little bit. The under the UNFCCC initiatives for adaptation, there was the concept of providing adaptation funds that are new and additional ODA funds, because many developing countries are facing problems that were not their they didn't cause the problem, and so the global community felt they needed additional assistance to address those costs. And so another project we have in our adaptation portfolio called the Adapt Asia Pacific project is assisting governments to accelerate their access to global adaptation funding, grant funding. And it's been working with 13 Asian countries and 14 Pacific Island countries, and those countries have identified different needs. For example, in Indonesia, we're helping identify a system to prioritize applications for a climate fund that they have already in Indonesia. In the Philippines, we've assisted in helping them gain access to the adaptation fund and preparing their application. In other countries, we've helped prepare projects in association with other donors like the UN in Laos. In Cambodia, we're assisting ADB and the World Bank to fill gaps in knowledge that are needed to prepare the project. So this project, our hope is that by the end of the project, we will have prepared pre-feasibility studies for each of the countries for nationwide community-based adaptation assistance. So we'll learn the lessons, we'll do the cost-benefit analysis, we'll find out what works, what does not work, and then we'll prepare a project at the pre-feasibility level that then we can pass on to World Bank, ADB, or another financier to finance the work in these countries. So it isn't just going out and doing the study and doing some practice things in the communities. We really want to pull together the best practices, do the cost-benefit analysis, show that these are real investments for the country, but that we want to access the grant climate funds to assist the country. So that's the end product that we want from the project.
Sure.
Yeah, please. No,
Thank you. I'm Narit Munchinarat from Cambodia. Actually, almost 20 years ago, I came to Thailand to attend a workshop on environmental reporting. Back then, we were alarmed by environmental destruction in Thailand, and it should have set a wake-up call for countries in the region, particularly in Cambodia, but we didn't seem to have learned the lesson from this destruction. And over the past nearly 20 years, Cambodia has destroyed its environment. It has cut down all the trees. So I'm wondering whether adaptation is more important than mitigation, or whether we have put enough efforts in both mitigation and adaptation with regards to climate change impact. Thank you.
The first thing, this is what's good about climate change is that for the first time in the history of the Earth, we have development sectors and environment people coming together for a shared objective. They're not arguing, they're both requiring the solutions. So that's a very positive thing. We've had decades of environmental degradation because of a lack of dialogue, effective dialogue between developers and the environment side. Now they're coming together under this umbrella of climate change. So for the environment people, the environment journalists and so on, that's a good way to view climate change. It is an opportunity to promote ecological sustainability. That's the #1 message you need to project. Climate change is an opportunity to promote ecological sustainability. So the first thing you have to look at is what's the priority for the individual country. Now, Cambodia contributes very little of the greenhouse gases. I'm not saying Cambodia should ignore their responsibilities globally, but 90% of its effort needs to go into how to respond to climate change, which is already locked in for a long time to come. And if we look at that adaptation, each unit of that adaptation is an opportunity to enhance the sustainability of our ecosystems, which underlie development and underlie community livelihoods. That's how I think we need to view this.
And if I could just add one point to that, and you mentioned environmental destruction and deforestation, as the international efforts for reforestation, the RED initiatives, what we call sustainable landscapes, as they start picking the species of trees to replant, one of the considerations they have to make is, well, is this ecosystem that was there when the previous tree species were there, is it still going to be there 20 years from now when the new landscape is developing? And so they need to examine what sort of species are they going to replant these landscapes with. And if they rush ahead and plant with the historic species, they may find out that these are no longer viable if the temperature and rainfall regimes have changed drastically. And so projects like this will help inform those decisions as they move forward in reforestation.
Please.
Just Paul, you're moving from science to application, I guess, next step. You mentioned 5, 6 communities you're going to try and target and apply the science. Is there any insurance policy for these communities? I mean, if I was growing coffee in the Central Highlands and USA came in and said, oh, don't do it, I'd say, you know, give me some money to switch over to something else here, because farmers don't know you're going to be right on this, and you don't really know either, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, and I think the point is you don't go in and say, grow this, don't grow that. That's not the purpose of this. And as we've discussed in terms of uncertainty, we're looking at trends. So the thing we want to have the communities do is understand that there are trends, and that these trends should be monitored. We're not telling them what to grow, we're not telling them what not to grow, and we also have to recognize that there are a lot of factors that go into decision making, not just climate change. But what we want to do is bring this information down and have it be a tool for them to make more informed decisions, whichever way they decide to go. So it would be very risky for us to go in and say, grow this, don't grow that, and that's not the intent of what we're going to do. Really, it's about building their capacity to understand the issues, to take action and to monitor those things. And in that case, I don't really think we need to worry about insurance policies, because it would be very risky to do anything else, or for anybody to suggest that they should do one thing or another at this point.
Perhaps just to add to that, I think a useful concept here is what is termed the adaptation deficit. And the adaptation deficit is those things that communities are doing now in response to past experience with past extreme events. So they've learnt from past extreme events, and they, with support from government and scientists, are exploring various strategies in their cropping regimes, livestock and so on, which will increase their resilience if that past extreme event were to happen again. Now, we call that the adaptation deficit because most communities and governments are a long way behind in meeting what they know might come again, in putting in place the preparedness and the cropping methods and so on, which will persist even if a major storm or drought happens. So the first thing that in any adaptation plan for a community for future climate is to support and reinforce all those good actions and policies and crops that the community themselves feel will be more resilient to if a past extreme happens again. So I think that's something that these 5 communities will be supported in doing, building on their own vision for how they can increase their resilience rather than coming in with a whole new toolbox. And by the time we've got through supporting them in what they were going to do anyway, but doing it better, then there might be a reason to start exploring more radical solutions. The key thing is to assess their current agenda with this new information that we can provide. It can allow them to fine-tune and to perhaps eliminate some things which may either have a negative impact on other communities downstream, or may have a negative impact on other sectors, or may not prepare them for future adaptation. So we can help them just by assessing their current agenda and fine-tuning it.
Thanks, Jeremy. Scattered throughout